So we've all heard the shocking figures about global poverty. And the very bottom of that, of course, is that almost one out of every five people in the world lives on less than $1 a day. And I always think that figure is actually very misleading, because for most of those people, it's less than $1 a day per family, not per person. So actually, these people are living on more like 10 or 15 cents a day very often. Now, I went to Kenya in 1985 on a Fulbright scholarship to see if engineering design could have any kind of impact on this problem. I went down for 10 months, and I stayed for 17 years. And of course, sub-Saharan Africa is the very poorest place in the world, where 40% of the people actually go to bed hungry every night, and 45% of the people are living on that less than $1 a day. And even worse than that, it's getting poorer by the day, as opposed to other parts of the world that are getting richer. Now, obviously, to solve this problem, you really have to understand it. And one of the things you first learn and understand when you work with poor people is that, in fact, they're not so different than us, in that all of these poor people anywhere in the world live in a cash economy. Just like us, they need money for absolutely everything. They need money to buy food, farm inputs, clothing, shelter, fuel, lighting, clean water, sanitation, education, healthcare, transport, communication. Everything they do, they need money. And in fact, a poor person's number one need anywhere in the world, sounds simple, but it's a way to make more money. And in these places, there really are no jobs, but luckily the people themselves are extremely hardworking and extremely entrepreneurial. And what's more, they can beg, borrow, or save a small amount of money, maybe only $10 or $15, maybe up to a couple $100, to start a small enterprise, because they need to make money to live, so they do this. But they don't get out of poverty, and the reason they don't get out of poverty is because they're in businesses which are over-competitive, and they don't know how to come up with a really good business idea, because they don't leave their village, they don't watch TV, they don't do market research. But even if they do come up with a business idea, which some of them of course do, they have a very hard time getting the equipment and tools they need to make that business viable. So equipment that they can afford to buy, afford to operate, and is profitable to use simply isn't available for them. So if we're talking about design to take people out of poverty, that means we have to design tools and equipment which help people to make money. Now, if we want to make people's life a little better, we can design labor-saving or time-saving equipment, but the reality is a poor person has a lot of time and a lot of free labor. We can design money-saving equipment. The reality is they don't have a lot of money to save, so they're not going to spend a lot of money to save more. So we really are talking about money-making equipment if we're talking about getting these people out of poverty. And of course, it has to be extremely affordable, because we're selling to the very poor people. And it also has to be very, very profitable to use. We need a business model with this technology that they can recover their investment costs within 3 to 6 months. Why 3 to 6 months? Because the majority of these people are farmers, and that's farm time. They're used to putting their money in the ground for 3 to 6 months and getting their money back, but you start talking about longer than that, they're not very interested. So what kind of new businesses? Well, if you're going to start a business and you're a poor person in a remote area, clearly your customers are going to be other poor people. So it's your neighbors. So you're going to sell products and services to your neighbors. Well, what do your neighbors need? We just saw a long list of the things that poor people buy. They need all these things. So in fact, there's all sorts of business opportunities for someone to start a business to sell to other poor people. And what's more, the poor very often pay the very highest prices in the world per unit. They buy things like cooking oil by the teaspoon and pay a much higher price than we do per unit, because we buy by, big can of it. So we set up KickStart in 1991 as a nonprofit to design very low-cost equipment that we sell to very poor entrepreneurs who start profitable businesses, with the goal to take millions of people out of poverty. And you'll see some of our technologies outside. This is a machine for making building blocks out of soil and cement compressed at very high pressure. Turns out it's a very profitable business. Another early business we got into was a machine for manufacturing cooking oil. Human-powered machine, you pull the handle up and down, you put sunflower seeds in the top, you get animal feed on one side, high-quality cooking oil on the other. You sell these things, you make very good money. And those businesses were good. And when you go outside, you'll see a lot of other businesses at this display. You'll see a transport bicycle, load-carrying bicycle, which enables people to have a business transporting. You'll see businesses for manufacturing fuel, because poor people buy fuel. You'll see businesses for communication, selling email and other useful information. So there's a ton of businesses that you can start to help poor people. But we asked ourselves, well, what is the one business to help the most people in Africa. Now, 80% of the poor people in Africa are poor rural farmers. They have one asset, a small plot of land, one basic skill, farming. The best thing they can do is move from subsistence farming to commercial irrigated farming. Because all of a sudden with irrigation, instead of waiting for the rain and getting 1 or 2 crops a year, they can now grow high-value fruits and vegetables. They can grow them all year long, get many planting seasons, and best of all, of course, bring out their crops in the dry season when nobody else has produce. They can make a lot of money doing this. But there was no affordable technology. Petrol pumps are simply too expensive, and petrol's not available in the rural area, and no one has electricity. So what we did is we designed a line of manually operated irrigation pumps. And this particular pump is a little Stairmaster machine. You walk back and forth like this. You have a hose pipe that comes out of the machine, goes down into a well as deep as 6 or 7 meters, so down 25, 30 feet. It pulls the water out of the well and then sprays it through a hose pipe here, a long hose pipe, water coming out. Now you can take this and you can irrigate as much as 2 acres of land. This particular woman, Janet here, was a widowed with 8 young kids, absolutely destitute. But she saved up her money to buy this in her first year of growing cabbages and tomatoes on this 2-acre plot. She employed 2 young men. She made $3,200 profit. Another pump you'll see out there is what we call the Moneymaker hip pump. This looks more like a little hand pump, except instead of operating like this where your arms get tired, you operate like this. And you rock back and forth. And you can do this for a long time. This retails at $34. Irrigates about 1 acre. This particular couple here were a landless couple with 3 young kids. They were staying in her father's place because that's the only place they could stay. He went to the city to try to get a job, managed to get a job serving food, making $1 a day. He was living in the slums, sending money home, really struggling. Saw this pump, saved up the money, went home. Within the first 3 months, made $1,200 profit in this little pump. Now you talk to them, they're going to buy land, they're going to build a house. In fact, on average, with this pump, if you go from irrigating with a bucket, which is what many of these people do before they get the pump, to irrigating with this pump in East Africa, we have an increase in income of 10-fold of their net farm income. And this literally lifts them out of poverty. Now, they're not living on that $110 a year. These are people who are living on about $300 or $400 a year. They have some other kind of income. So their net total income is going up by a factor, anywhere from a factor of 3 or 4. But literally takes them out of poverty. And to date in East Africa, between Kenya and Tanzania where we work, we've got 52,000 entrepreneurs successfully operating these businesses with these technologies. Presently, 800 new businesses are being started every month. And between them, they're making $54 million a year in new profits and wages. And this is a huge percentage, it turns out, of the GDP of Kenya. 0.6% of the GDP of Kenya is revenues they're generating. 0.25% in Tanzania. Now, the global potential for manual irrigation is absolutely huge, something like 35 to 40 million pumps. And thanks to Paul Pollock, who is sitting here, is going to talk next, and he's really the godfather of irrigation, manual irrigation. Already 2 million people around the world are using human-powered irrigation pumps. But the potential is absolutely huge, and Paul's going to tell you a lot more about what he's doing with that. And you can see where that potential is. Other critical design criteria that we've learned over the years is that absolutely the poor people deserve very high quality design and engineering. You need strong and durable items, easy to maintain, easy to transport and store, easy to use. Training is expensive to give. Culturally appropriate, of course, and human powered. There is no petrol in most places, like I said, no electricity, so it's got to be very energy efficient. The human power puts out 80 watts only, barely get a light bulb on. Well, now you've got to pump a lot of water, you've got to pump a lot of oil, and you need very good ergonomics, of course. So there's actually a huge amount of engineering that goes into these things, and of course you want environmentally sustainable design as well. So if you want all these things, you really better mass produce these things to a high quality in a large factory. We started off producing these in Africa. This is actually an African factory, but we're now moved to China where we can get even better quality at an even lower price. Because like I say, the poor deserve really well-engineered tools and equipment. The other, and probably the most important lesson we learned, is you don't give things away to people. So many development aid agencies give things away. Oh, the poor people are so poor, we need to give them things. Giving things away is simply not fair. How do I decide to give to you as opposed to you? How do I make that decision? It's not sustainable. I give it to you this year, 3 years later you need a new pump or you need a spare part. How do you get it? I'm not going to be there again to give it to you. There's no shop to buy it in. things aren't utilized when you give people something. Somebody gives you something, you don't really appreciate it. You're like, oh, I didn't really want this, I wanted that, but okay, so I won't really use it. And finally, of course, it creates dependency and it kills dignity. I don't know if any of you have ever been begging or asking to be given something, but it doesn't feel very good. Then we need to be sure the products get to the people, because you can have a great design, but if they don't get to the people, it doesn't do any good. So you need to sell them, and you need to sell them through the private sector supply chain. These are existing supply chains where they sell other products. They sell farm supplies like seeds and fertilizer, or maybe they only sell Coca-Cola. They sell some other product and someone's distributing them. Let's use that same network to get these products out. So you have the factories producing, private factories, private distributors, and local retail shops. In our case, in East Africa, we have 550 local retail shops that sell these pumps. Everyone is motivated, everyone makes money in the supply chain. And then finally, you need to tell these very poor farmers, hey, there's a new thing you can do. There's an irrigation pump out there that's going to change your life. It's very expensive for you. It's going to take a lot of your income, but it's going to change your life. This is a very hard sale, and you need to do a huge amount of marketing. We mass market, live demonstrations in the rural area at the retail shops. We build a brand name, in our case, Moneymaker, because a poor person only cares about making money. Radio advertisements, newspaper, billboards, promotions, all sorts of things to get these pumps out there and tell people about it. And so, in conclusion, yes, design can kickstart the end to poverty. You design affordable, money-making products that meet all the other design criteria. You sell them through a private sector supply chain, and you invest time and money to develop the market, because it does take time and money to convince people to buy these things. Thanks.